Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another video. Today we have one more time the one and only Andreas Antonopoulos. Andreas, welcome back. How are you today?
Catalina. I'm doing great. Thank you so much.
It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure to have you. We have different topics to cover today. Some are from myself and some are from the audience. And the first one is from myself. This is a topic that I would like to discuss that I don't see a lot of people talking about. In another interview, I heard you saying that you as a developer, you like to go and check the code, the Bitcoin code, in order to find vulnerabilities so that, because you're never 100% sure, Bitcoin continues evolving, and you go and check it so that you continue trusting the network effect and give value to the system. So related to this topic, I have two questions. One is, what about the people who are not developers and don't have the ability to do so? And do you think there should be more and better communication and clarity from the developers to the whole world, to us, so that we continue trusting the network effect and giving value to the system?
Yeah, that's a great question, Catalina. I spent a lot of time in the very beginning in 2012 and 2013 trying to find vulnerabilities. Nowadays, I don't do that anymore because unfortunately it's not my main area of focus. And there are far better people doing it. I focus more on education. I needed to persuade myself that there were no obvious ways to break Bitcoin in the early days, because like many, I was a skeptic in the beginning. And I did information security and vulnerability testing back then. It was part of my job. So how do you test and how do you trust? I look at the mailing lists, and I also look at IRC meetings, and I also look at the pull requests that are happening, and I try to follow as best as I can. I also read some very good newsletters like the Bitcoin OpTech newsletter that gives very good information about what's happening in the space. I would say the Bitcoin developers, the core developers especially, do a fantastic job of communicating. Obviously, they're communicating at a very technical level. But then there are others who take that and make it more simple to understand, like Chain Code Labs that does the Bitcoin OpTech newsletter, and myself when I try to explain things on videos. It's not really possible for the Bitcoin core developers to explain things in ways that non-developers can understand, right? This is highly specialized work, highly focused work, and involves cryptography, mathematics, software engineering, systems engineering, and it's complicated. How do you trust? Well, the good news is that there are maybe several dozen developers who are very active in writing code, but there are hundreds of developers who adopt, adapt, and reuse code within the ecosystem for their own applications, and also review code for the use in various business environments and applications. And beyond that, there's an even bigger ecosystem of academics and developers who read and review the code. So if you can't read it yourself, you have to trust that others are doing that job. And unfortunately, that's not a purely trustless system, but we rely on experts to help us understand complex systems all the time in many areas of the world. So in the case of open source software, this is one of the most open and transparent mechanisms of software development, and it's about as good as it gets in terms of being able to trust in a very open and transparent way.
I think we should see more people like you. I try to do it as well, as much as I can, breaking this down, right? Like being a bridge between the developers and the rest of the world. I think we should have more of that. And unfortunately, we don't. In terms of progress, that Bitcoin is doing in terms of innovation, in terms of scalability. Are we progressing enough? Because we know that Bitcoin is the most decentralized, transparent, censorship resistant, secure and open to innovation system in the world. We cannot break decentralization, and that requires time in order for the system to evolve correctly, aligned to that focus. Are we progressing enough, Andreas? What are your thoughts?
In some areas, yes. In other areas, no. I would say that there are a couple of areas where I think the progress hasn't been fast enough. And that's partly because of the very conservative nature of development that's required to keep a system like this running without problems. Bitcoin is different from many other systems, and it's very different from all other cryptocurrencies in that it has a lot of value riding on top of it, and it's a system that needs to be robust. So from that perspective, it has to be conservatively developed. And I think that's one of its kind of core features, that it is very robust and very conservatively developed. That can go too far. And I think we're seeing it now in terms of the activation of Taproot, which is a set of features that have been introduced. More than 3 years of development has gone into these features. Three main features, Schnorr signatures, TapScript, and Taproot, collectively called Taproot. And there's a big debate on how it should be activated. And I think that debate has derailed a bit due to a very conservative approach, and that's worrying. I would like to see that activated sooner rather than later. But you know, this is not a system where it's about popularity or influence or things like that, and it shouldn't be. It's a system that should be based on scientific peer review. Sometimes the voices that have influence get in that conversation. I've tried to avoid doing that for the most part. The two areas where I think we've got the slowest development are privacy. Bitcoin suffers from privacy problems because all of the transactions are public, and the privacy technologies have not really kept up with the popularity of the cryptocurrency. And when I see things like Taproot taking so long to activate and so long to be brought into the mainnet, it makes me concerned that we won't see privacy upgrades that Bitcoin needs. So that's a problem. And I've been saying that since probably 2015 or 2016, that privacy should be our first and topmost priority. And Taproot is a privacy enhancement. It just doesn't go as far as I think we should be going in that area. The other area that is very difficult is wallet user interface. The way this works is really simple. It doesn't matter what core developers put in the protocol if users can't use it. And users interact with the system through wallets. If it's not in a wallet user interface, if it's not easy to use, if it's not available to be used in a consistent, transparent, easy to use manner for the users, then it doesn't matter if it's in the protocol. It won't get deployed. And that's a problem we've seen a lot, where there are capabilities within the protocol, but they are not used because the wallets aren't keeping up. And this is an area which has a lot of difficulty because it's very difficult to monetize wallet development. So wallet developers need to do continuous maintenance. It's very, very hard to keep up. And many of them get distracted with a whole bunch of altcoins. But even just staying in Bitcoin, it's very difficult to keep up.
I remember.
And we see that with the adoption of Lightning.
Yeah, I remember last year, the last interview that we recorded, I asked you, where would you like to see, or where should the market evolve and the technology evolve next, the fastest? and you said exactly that. And now it's interesting that you're noticing that we are a little bit delayed on that. Interesting. Perfect, thank you. The next question is also related to the developers, because I heard a developer, Peter Todd, talking about this, and I would like to hear your thoughts. He said that one of Bitcoin's biggest vulnerabilities is a possible internal sabotage from the developers themselves. How possible do you think this is?
It's possible. I think it's highly unlikely, and I don't think it would be sustainable. So it could do some short-term damage, but in the long term, I don't think it's something that is catastrophic for the system. I would say Peter tends to be very pessimistic. And that's a very good quality to have in someone who is focused on security. He finds the things to worry about, and that's an important role, but I'm a bit more optimistic than Peter. So I would say, yes, that is a big vulnerability, but it's unlikely to cause long-term damage to Bitcoin.
Okay, next question is from the audience. This is a taboo topic, or a lot of people were requesting this. I think you covered it in your YouTube channel, and I will do that as well in mine. But are quantum computers a threat to Bitcoin, not in the short term, but in the middle and long term?
I don't think so. Not in the short term, simply because we don't have quantum computing capable of breaking Bitcoin's key size. In the medium to long term, possibly, but only if Bitcoin development stagnated and there weren't upgrades to quantum resistant signature algorithms. You know, one of the things that's happening right now with the Taproot upgrade is what we're seeing is the introduction of a completely new signature algorithm, Schnorr signatures, into Bitcoin. And you have a system where both Schnorr signatures and elliptic curve digital signature algorithm will coexist. If this is successful, it demonstrates that the signature algorithm in Bitcoin can be upgraded. The main concern for quantum computing is in the signature algorithm. It's not in the hashing. Hashing is much more robust against quantum computers. But discrete logarithm problem, which underlies the signatures, is much more vulnerable to quantum computers, and therefore that's where we need an upgrade if and when quantum computers get fast enough. So watch how we deploy Schnorr signatures. If we're successful with that, then you can see a path forward for introducing quantum resistant signature algorithms when it is necessary. A very important idea in software engineering and engineering in general is to avoid premature optimization. There isn't a market demand, there isn't a security need to introduce quantum resistance today, and it is an expensive development. These developments take years to build, test, and deploy and activate in the network. So it's actually not a good idea to expect developers to build things today for things that are not problems. We have other problems that are more pressing than this, and if and when it becomes pressing, then I think we will see a path forward. I hope.
Excellent. Next topic, also from the audience, another taboo topic. I will cover it on my channel as well, but I would like to hear a brief answer from you. Centralization of mining in China, from a hash rate point of view and from a mining equipment production point of view. Thoughts on that?
You know, I don't think these are really taboo topics. I think there's a tendency in general with this system for people to try and find the hidden vulnerability, the catch, the reason why this is going to fail. And I understand that, because as a skeptic, I also did that in 2012, 2013, and gradually I understood how multifaceted this system is. So I'm not concerned about centralization in China. We've been talking about this since 2013. And if anything, what's happened is the centralization of mining in China has declined over time. We are less centralized today than we were in the past, both in terms of pools and in terms of hash rate. And so we now have some fairly robust companies that build and deploy ASICs and mining hash rate in other places in the world. Canada, the USA, Scandinavia, Northern Europe, various places around the world. And I expect that will continue to develop. In the early days of mining, things concentrated a lot in China because ASICs were developing by a factor of 100 or 1,000 each year, which made them very quickly obsolete and brought in the next wave of technology. This required a very short distribution path between the factories that make the chips and their use in producing hash rate and near electricity providers. Essentially, if you tried to move it a few hundred kilometers or worse, a few thousand kilometers, by the time it got to its destination, it was already unprofitable to mine with it. Now, the mining hardware has reached the front end of Moore's law, the semiconductor limits. And as a result, it grows only by a factor of 2 every 18 months, which seems very fast and is for consumer electronics, but for mining compared to the past, it's much slower. This means that these chips can be manufactured and they're profitable for 2 to 3 years minimum after they're manufactured. And as a result, they can now be more broadly distributed, and there are many incentives to uncentralize those capabilities. So I'm not worried. In fact, I think after 2016, when we hit Moore's law, things really started trending in the opposite direction.
Excellent. Next topic is a very current topic that people wanted me to ask you. Mm-hmm. Friction between the financial world that we know, centralized, and the evolution of the decentralized world that is not fully decentralized yet, except from the Bitcoin system. In terms of regulations, I agree with you. It's really good that you said that we are delayed in terms of privacy. I think we should really accelerate the process because the evolution of the technology may help us avoid regulations and governments trying to control people more and more in Bitcoin as well. What are your thoughts about regulations and everything that they are trying to do right now? And do you really think that the evolution of the technology will solve this eventually? And also, this is my personal opinion, I don't know what you think, if they try to regulate that much, innovation, entrepreneurship, and money will flow to another countries that are crypto-friendly. But yeah, what do you think about what's going on? And should people should be worried about this? Is this only temporal or not?
Well, I mean, I've been talking about this for the entire time. My very first talk, that ironically was to an empty room in San Jose in 2013, was about neutrality and making sure that we don't end up in a situation where we regulate this technology with whitelists and blacklists and restrictions on addresses and things like that. I saw this conflict coming. And the reason I saw this conflict coming is because it happened exactly like that in the internet. People don't remember, but in the 90s, there was a protracted fight over cryptography, over the consumer availability of cryptography and the open internet. And that's a fight that the internet won. And it's a fight that never ends because we have to continue fighting for openness and transparency and systems that empower individuals. And I was expecting this would happen in Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies, and it's already happening. Now we're seeing it develop a bit. For the first few years, I think regulators and governments mostly dismissed and ignored this technology as it will never happen, it's going to fail, it's going to shut down on its own, we're going to kill it, whatever. And that denial has gradually migrated into a more reactionary and aggressive stance against cryptocurrencies. And they're trying to roll out all of these regulations. I'm optimistic. And the reason I'm optimistic is simply because the asymmetry of the forces at work. The regulators who are trying to regulate this technology operating within the framework of a centralized system of government, within specific jurisdictions, and through a process which in liberal democracies is deliberative and it takes time, and you write the law and then it's challenged in the courts and back and forth, back and forth. They move very, very slowly. And their reach, even the US reach, only extends so far. Meanwhile, this decentralized technology moves very, very fast. It's developing in all areas simultaneously from different people all around the world. It's not bound by jurisdiction, and it's not bound by these kinds of bureaucratic delays. So you're going to have this situation where in authoritarian countries, they're going to simply ban it, but they can't actually enforce that ban because nobody respects the rule of law. And people will want to use it even more when it's banned. And in liberal democracies, they can't just outright ban it because they're going to get tied up in courts for decades. So there's going to be this kind of compromise where they write regulations, and these regulations account for the technology as it was. Right now, for example, people are regulating cryptocurrencies as if it's still Bitcoin of 2013. It's not Bitcoin of 2013 anymore. So by the time they write that regulation, the technology has moved away. They write a regulation over there, the technology moves away. And this game continues. So they will always be behind. Ultimately, a centralized, slow-moving regulatory environment cannot catch up with a decentralized system of innovation that is solving a real human need, for which the regulators have no solutions other than we don't care whether you have access to the world economy or not. When 87% of the human population lives in either authoritarian regimes or broken governments and has poor or broken currencies, that is a massive human need. Regulators cannot solve that human need. Decentralized cryptocurrencies can solve that human need. That's a battle we will win. It's going to take a lot of effort, and it's going to go back and forth. But ultimately, that's the way we're going to go. And I'm not worried at all about what regulators are going to do.
Excellent. Andreas, we're running out of time. I know you have to go. So this is the last question for today. This is from the audience, not from me. What do you think about Dogecoin? And do you think it's going to continue increasing in price, Andreas?
You know, Dogecoin was started as a joke, and it developed a very fun culture and community around it. In fact, I went to the very first Dogecoin conference in San Francisco, and I spoke there. And it was a lot of fun. If you take Dogecoin seriously as an investment, you're missing the point. The point of Dogecoin was to have units that are extremely cheap, that allow you to do things like tipping, hundreds of thousands of Doge. But if you look at the actual fundamentals of Doge with its issuance, it just issues millions and millions of Doge. And continuously dilutes the value. So if you think that is a sound investment, I think you're missing the point. So anybody who thinks that, they're missing the point. This is supposed to be fun. It's not supposed to be a serious investment. I personally would not treat it as a serious investment. I had a whole bunch of Doge early on. And I used it I gave it away to people as tips, as donations for fun. I think I gave some of it to charity as well. And that's it. I don't have any now, and I wouldn't invest in it.
Andreas, fantastic interview as always. Thank you for your time. I personally appreciate it very much. And we hope to have you again, maybe end of the year, to see how much improvement we have made regarding all the topics that we covered today. So thank you so much. Muchas gracias, and take care. Gracias.
Thank you so much, Catalina. As always, great questions. I appreciate being on the show. Have a good one.